A sharp voice shattered the elegance. "Get out!" The harsh, dismissive tone sent a ripple through the air. Barron Trump, seated at a corner table, lifted his gaze. His posture stiffened slightly, his fingers pausing around the glass of water he had just picked up. He wasn't the type to seek out drama, but there was something about the way those words were spoken, so cold, so final, that immediately caught his attention. He turned his head toward the source of the commotion. A young waiter, no older than his mid-20s, stood frozen in place, his face drained of color. His name tag read Daniel. His fists were clenched, his breathing shallow. Across from him, a stern-faced manager loomed with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable but unmistakably rigid. "You're done here," the manager continued, his voice carrying across the room. "Hand over your apron and leave." Daniel swallowed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, please, I don't care," the manager interrupted with an air of finality. "You broke the rules. Now go." A murmur rippled through the restaurant. Other staff members stole cautious glances, their ears tuned in despite their best attempts to act uninterested. The wealthy patrons, comfortably seated at their pristine tables, remained indifferent, except for one. Barron Trump stood up. The sudden movement caught the manager's attention. His posture stiffened further as he realized who was walking toward them. Barron's voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. What did he do? The manager hesitated for a moment before straightening his tie. "Mr. Trump, this is an internal matter. This employee overstepped his boundaries." Daniel exhaled sharply and turned toward Barron. His voice carried a quiet conviction. "There was a homeless man outside," Daniel explained, his voice steady despite the pressure weighing on him. "He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. I gave him some leftover bread and soup from the kitchen." Barron blinked. That was it. The manager scoffed. "We have policies. This is a luxury establishment, not a soup kitchen." A tense silence followed. The weight of the words lingered, pressing down on everyone within earshot. Barron let out a slow breath. His father had taught him many things: how to be strategic, how to lead, and most importantly, how to recognize real value in people. He looked Daniel directly in the eye. "Where do you live?" Daniel hesitated, confused. A tiny apartment downtown." "Why?" "Not anymore," Barron said, pulling out his phone. "You start a new job tomorrow. Something better. Somewhere you won't be punished for doing the right thing." Daniel's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" Barron turned back to the manager, his tone unwavering. "You just fired the wrong person, because the only one losing something today is you." And with that, he walked out. 1 week later, Daniel adjusted his tie nervously as he stepped into the towering office building. The sheer size of it made him feel small, but not in a bad way. In a way that made him realize his life was about to change. After that night at the restaurant, Barron had made a few calls. Within 24 hours, Daniel had an interview. Within 48 hours, he had an offer. Within a week, he had a new apartment, a better salary, and an opportunity that he never would have imagined. Not just another waiting job, a management trainee position at one of the Trump Organization's properties. A career, a future. As he walked into the modern glass building, he still couldn't believe it. Just a week ago, he had been humiliated, standing in the middle of a restaurant, thinking his life was falling apart. Now he was here. As he stepped into his new office, he noticed a small envelope waiting on his desk. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. It was a note. "The world needs more people like you. Never stop being kind. BT." Daniel sat down, staring at the note for a long moment. He had lost a job that night, but in the end, he had gained something far greater. 2 months later. Daniel never forgot that night. His new job had been challenging, but he adapted quickly. He worked harder than ever, determined to prove that Barron's belief in him wasn't misplaced. One afternoon, while reviewing reports at his desk, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Meet me in the lobby." A sense of curiosity mixed with nervousness crept over him as he stepped into the sleek, high-ceilinged lobby. And there he was, Barron Trump. Dressed sharply in a tailored navy blue suit, hands in his pockets, his expression as unreadable as ever. Daniel approached, unsure what to say. "Mr. Trump, Barron held up a hand. "How's the job?" Daniel smiled. "Honestly, it's life-changing." Barron nodded approvingly. "Good, because this is only the beginning." Daniel frowned slightly, confused. "What do you mean?" Barron took out a business card and handed it to him. "There's a leadership training program starting next month. I want you in it." Daniel's breath caught. You think I'm ready for that?" Barron smirked. "You were ready the moment you stood up for someone who had nothing. That's the kind of leadership we need." Daniel looked down at the card in his hand, then back at Barron. His eyes burned slightly, but he blinked it away. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Barron gave a small nod, then turned to leave. But before walking away, he glanced over his shoulder and said one last thing. "Don't thank me. Just make sure you do the same for someone else one day." And with that, he was gone. Daniel stood in the middle of the grand lobby, holding the card in his hand. He had been fired, humiliated. But in the end, he had found his purpose.